recent American marathoners who have defined consistency and grit, Scott Fauble's name is on the list. He's competed on some of the sport's biggest stages, mixed it up with the world's elite, and trained at the highest levels. And he's done all of this during a period in which the marathon has evolved more dramatically than in any other stretch in the history of running. This is Inside the Marathon Project, the podcast in collaboration with our partners at FloTrack that takes you inside the athletes, organizers, and dreamers behind this one-of-a-kind marathon experience. And it's getting close. We are inside a month now before the gun sounds in Chandler, Arizona, December 20th and 21st. I'm your host, Steve Sievert, and I have really been looking forward to this episode. We've got Fobs, as he is affectionately known, ready to go for a conversation, and it's a special episode because we are reconnecting Scott with his longtime coach at Hoka NAZ Elite, of course, Ben Rosario. And Ben has a little something to do with this whole marathon project thing. He's only the co-founder and CEO. So undoubtedly, we're going to talk about the collaboration between Ben and Scott in their athlete and coach days. We're going to talk a little bit about the marathon project as well, and really just chew it up for the next 45 minutes or so. All right, that's enough of the intro. Gentlemen, let's get you in here. Welcome to Inside the Marathon Project.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to do this.
And I'm excited to mostly listen and chime in here and there.
Well, Scott, let's start with this. What has been going on in your training log and what's been on your mind recently?
Well, not much. I am officially 100% retired from professional running. Haven't really been training, and I definitely haven't raced in quite a while. So, yeah, I'm done. I'm in a different phase of my life, and it's exciting.
Well, that's a big one right off the bat. So let's dive into that. You're the first guest who's come on and said, "Hey, I'm retired from the sport." So I've got to dive into this for sure. Take us into the thinking and the mindset then that led up to what is obviously a career-altering and life-altering decision.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a weird process where, like, I mean, to back up quite a bit, before the 2024 trials, I was dealing with this thing where I, like, in December before the trials, I took a gel, and the gel like slid a little too far back in my throat, and I gagged on it. And for some reason, I just developed this like psychosomatic like gagging that happened on runs. It would happen like whenever I even thought about going to do a workout. It would happen when I was packing my bag. It happened when I was driving to workouts. And I thought it was just sort of this like weird classical conditioning thing. I talked to like sports psychologists to try to figure it out. Obviously that didn't happen before the trials because it came up big time and I threw up at like 6 miles. So that wasn't ideal. And then I spent basically from like February to August of 2024, like really trying to figure it out and really trying to like get to the bottom of it and solve like or come up with a remedy. Included psychologists, psychiatrists. I still am taking, but I started taking anti-anxiety medication for it because it seemed like maybe there was some aspect to that, and I've had anxiety in my past. And then seemed like we were kind of like getting over the hill. We were kind of like moving past that issue. And then in early August of 2024, I ran this super low key race. It was like an 8-miler in San Diego. It didn't even have prize money. It didn't have like even a pro field, but I was like, I need some positive reps before I try to run New York in the fall. And I like really had to put the moves on to like beat some kind of out of shape college kids, and like barely kind of squeaked out a win. And I was like thinking about running New York in a few months. And I was like, I'm nowhere near where I need to be. And at that point, like something very specific, like I had like a very strong realization where like every time I had signed on to run New York or run Boston or like really almost any marathon or any race in general, like a part of me thought I could win. And it was like that sort of like, if I had a really good day, if I was really fit, if I got a little bit lucky, I felt like I could win. And when I was getting ready for New York, right after I had run that race, I was kind of like trying to convince myself that I could get back to where I'd already been. I was kind of like, well, I bet I can probably get top 10. I can probably get like seventh, again. And when that was the case, like when I realized that I had made that switch, I was like, this is no longer like a good use of my time. Like I'm not getting better. I don't think that this is what I want to be doing if I'm not striving for like the very, very highest levels. And so I decided kind of like one day I was a professional runner. Next day I realized that, and the next day I retired. And I called Joe, my coach at the time, and I called Josh and my agent, and I was like, yeah, no, it's time to pull the plug. And yeah, that was it.
Wow. Take us back to that period then in 2024. You mentioned February through August where you were trying to understand what was going on. What was your training and running like at that time while you were trying to figure this out?
Real start and stop. Like after the trial, since I had to drop out so early, I was like, well, my body's fine. So I tried to get ready for Boston again, and I just like couldn't get it under control. So like some days I would have a good run where I could like go and I could do 70, 80 minutes. And some days like I would start like dry heaving before I even got off my block. Some days I would dry heave like in the car going to like my run. Um, and it was kind of like we would figure out. I was working with sports psychologist that I've worked with a lot, Shannon Thompson, who was actually I met in Flagstaff through Ben. Um, and we would like figure out like a little breakthrough here or a little breakthrough there, and then it would just sort of take over again. And yeah, so it was frustrating, but it was also like um, it's not like I could have like done anything about it. Like I was very out of my control. So it was like some days I got to run and some days I didn't. And we finally got to a place where I was like under control enough to string some workouts together and go to a race. But um, yeah, I wouldn't say we ever like 100% figured it out. It's still something that I like occasionally deal with here when I don't like even now when I'm not really running, but it'll just sort of happen randomly. But it's not debilitating anymore.
Through this process, did you ever come up with a diagnosis?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like a weird thing, but basically I've never been able to burp. This is a very weird tangent. I've never been able to burp. Like, most people can like swallow air and then belch. I've never been able to do that. And so like if I like have a couple seltzers or have a couple beers in a short period of time, I just feel really, really, really full and like want to throw up, and that air never gets out. And so I have like some issue with my throat where the esophagus is like doesn't allow air back up. So I think that was like the root cause, and it was like triggered by the gel sliding back in my throat. And then there's also like some like stress and like kind of like it happens more when I'm stressed, like some underlying anxiety stuff. But um, no, I mean, for the most part, it's like that it was started by that sort of physical thing that happened. And for whatever reason, it flared up before the trials, probably stress.
But back when you were crushing it and placing in the top 10 in New York and Boston, you're competing on the world stage, you weren't experiencing any of this. Is that right?
I didn't experience it until I got kind of gagged on that gel.
Where are you now then in terms of coming to the realization that because of this and because of the mindset that you've had to really adopt to grapple with this, are you at peace with your decision?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't miss it. Like there are things about being a professional runner that I do miss. Like I miss like every day feeling really, really important. And like I miss the feeling of like you're doing something special every day. And like when you're really, really fit and it feels like you're kind of like every day you're sort of breaking new ground and getting a little bit fitter and getting a little fitter. I miss that, but I don't miss like running. I run about 8 to 12 miles a week now, and that's fine. Um, I I think like I always had the mindset, even when I started at NAZ Elite, like my mindset, my goal was to figure out exactly how good I could be. And I did, like for like a 4 or 5 year span there, figured out exactly how good I could be. It was seventh place at Boston. It was 2:08:52. So like I don't think I left. I think like physically I was still at that level when I retired, but like mentally I wasn't. And that's okay. Like I was ready to be, some part of me was ready to be done. And maybe if I had gotten another shot at Boston or another shot at New York, maybe it's a sixth place or whatever. But that's kind of like all all sort of the same, and it doesn't like change how good I was, you know. So I don't have any regrets about retiring. Like I haven't missed it. I haven't there's never been a time when I like thought like, oh, I could give this another shot. So I'm fine.
So it sounds like this is pretty
Yeah.
final. What about your overall relationship with running now? You say you're only running, a handful of miles a week. Do you see that being the case into at least the near future?
Yeah. I my like at towards the end of my career, like my body was pretty banged up. Like I have a pretty bad hip and I could manage it, but I was still doing like an hour to 90 minutes of rehab like a day just to feel kind of mediocre on my runs. So unless something changes in my mind and I decide I want to do rehab again, I think that's kind of what my body will be able to handle. You know, like I have arthritis in both my big toes and both my knees. So if I do keep it in the 8 to 12 mile range, that those things don't flare up. And if I push it a little bit, then they do. And I don't necessarily need to, um, like, uh, like put myself through discomfort anymore to run.
Well, on the short list of things that have to be great about not being a pro runner anymore, all that rehab and prehab has got to be very, very close to the top of the list, I
Yeah.
would
And it
think.
was like, you know, I didn't mind doing it when there was a point to it. Like that was part of the process. Like I loved the process of being a professional runner, but I don't think I was ever, you know, particularly maybe towards the end, I don't think I was like in love with running. I was in love with competing. I was in love with training. I was in love with the process of getting as good as I possibly could. But now that that process isn't like the driver in my life, then I'm kind of good setting it to the side.
How are you filling your days right
Well, I
now?
have a 10-month-old, so that takes up quite a bit of time. Uh, my wife and I had Theo last January, so uh, wrangling him is and you know watching him grow up is takes a good chunk of my time. And then I've been the marketing director at Portland Running Company for the last 4 months or so. So yeah, I mean between those two, I still feel like I'm pretty busy.
When you look back on your career, what stands out the most in terms of what you were able to accomplish?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think like in terms of like a singular day, it was probably Boston 2019. It was pretty awesome. But I think like being just really, really good for like a long period of my career was like that was pretty awesome. It was pretty great. I think that was kind of my accomplishment was being as consistent as you can be, being at the top of my game for, you know, a pretty good chunk of time was about, you know, that's all kind of all I can ask for.
Ben, I want to bring you in here on this discussion and get your perspective, kind of taking things back even farther in the collaboration and the relationship that you have with Scott. When did the two of you connect, and what was sort of the immediate feeling that you had about Scott as a person and Scott as an athlete?
Yeah, sometimes questions like this are good because I feel like everybody knows this stuff because we wrote that book, and I forget that not everybody in the whole world has read that. So I'm happy to answer this question. No, Scott was part of the class of 2015 in NAZ Elite or at NAZ Elite. So he came in with Craig Lutz and Ryan Donor. So they had both run for the University of Texas. And as I've said in interviews over the years, he was probably the third most recognizable name out of that three. Craig and Ryan in particular had high school careers that were really quite stellar, and so a lot of people knew them. And um, you know, they had done well in college also, but you kind of keep that fan base, I think. And Scott had done really well, but he was at Portland, which doesn't have maybe the same cachet as Texas, and so I knew that Scott was good for sure. He had been top 13 three times in the NCAA at the cross country championships, but didn't have quite as, his track times, I guess, weren't quite as stellar, maybe. So he was still, I think, a little bit under the radar. But he reached out, and we went back and forth a little bit. And he had a guy on his side, Steve Edwards, that's Shalane's husband, Shalane Flanagan's husband. And Steve was really big on Scott and had worked with him at the running store and told me that he was a great guy and that we should take him. And so we did. And so that's when I met him, really was in that recruitment process in 15. And then he joined the team in the summer of 15. And we went from there.
And did you know early on after he joined that the marathon was going to be where he was going to specialize as a pro?
Yeah, I think so. I'm very pragmatic. So, I didn't think we were going to take this 14-minute, 28:40 guy and make him a 13-minute, 27:30 guy necessarily, but I knew he could get a lot better. And I typically believe in the ability to build your aerobic capacity. I think that there's a giant runway there, and he was certainly that type of runner. So, I mean, I don't remember the conversations, but I think we knew that was the future.
Yeah, because I had run 63:59 in college in the half. So, and I was never good at the 5K and never good at the 3K. So it was pretty obvious that I was going to be better the longer we went.
When you look back on those early days, Scott, what was the dynamic like as you were getting settled in to the team and then also adjusting to a new coach in Ben?
It's a good question. I mean, that was a long time ago. I don't know. I mean, I think I was really competitive, and I think I probably had a little chip on off my shoulder. And that fall, I remember it was wasn't going that well, or it was frustrating because other people were really fit, and then all of a sudden it kind of snapped into place. And then once it snapped into place, I felt like I was kind of ready to rip, and I felt like myself, and I felt like it changed kind of I would say kind of overnight, where it was one day we're I'm not really sure how good this is going. We're not sure what the how competitive we can be in the upcoming races, and then had a couple of really good workouts, and it was oh no, actually you can compete. And and then from there it was just sort of gas pedal down. And I think we were that played into kind of, I think, my strengths as a racer and as a runner of being able to run pretty fearlessly, being very emotionally ready to race, and being really competitive. So once the kind of fitness caught up to that, I think it was pretty smooth.
Looking back on it, do you remember, was there a specific moment or a specific catalyst that led to that sort of snapping in that you mentioned?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it was just the fitness coming around. We did a workout down in Sedona. It was mile repeats before the club cross country championships, and it was the first time I think I had surprised Ben and surprised myself, and really shown other people how tough I was, and how much I was able to get myself to hurt even in a non-race situation. And I think once we had that, where that was very clear that oh, I can actually do some cool stuff, then things got a lot smoother. I think it's always tough when you have an athlete who's really, really talented, but maybe is hit and miss in those situations. That's harder to deal with than someone who maybe doesn't have that sort of 13 flat engine, I never did, and never would have, no matter how much time I spent at the 5K. I was never going to be that quick, but I could really kind of make myself hurt. And that's easier. It's easier to figure out problems that way when you're going to have that gear.
Well, yeah, and Steve, it was for me, it gives you a mandate to push this guy, because he wants to be pushed, and he can go to the well super, super deep. And so there's so much more you can do with an athlete like that. You spend a lot of time with the other athletes trying to get them there to that point. But when you have the athlete that's at that point, oh man, I mean, the sky's the limit, and like Scott said, I think it was just gas pedal down from there on. And I totally remember that workout, and I've talked about it in interviews. And yeah, he followed that up with a killer race at Club Cross Country, and then at the Great Edinburgh Run in Scotland. And we were just off and running.
As the old saying goes, running is 50% physical and 100% mental. And Scott, I want to pull on a thread that you just mentioned that ties to that cliche. You say you were always emotionally ready to race, which may be a little bit different than mentally ready. I'm not sure I've heard that phrase, emotionally ready, before. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think like it's scary to like really, really push yourself. And it's scary for like a couple reasons. One, because it's like really going to hurt, but also like it might go bad. Like the race might not go well, even if you make all the right decisions and even if you push yourself 100%. And that is like the scariest thing, I think. And that was never like that much of an issue for me. Like I was never super afraid of like losing. I was like always pretty willing to like put myself out there and then let the chips fall where they may. And I think I've, like becoming a dad recently, I've been thinking about like that and with the way my dad sort of taught me to race, because he was ran in college and at University of Utah for a couple of years. And I remember when I was like first getting into it, we would go for runs together, and he would just kind of like randomly on a run out of nowhere just be like, run as hard as you can to the top of that hill. And it's like no prep, no like reason, like no whatever. It was just, that was my job right then. It was just go to the top of the hill as hard as possible. And like the way he taught me to run the 1600 was to run the first two laps pretty hard, run the third lap as hard as you can, and then hold on for the last lap. And it's like, I was like lucky because I was talented enough where like when I first started running, that strategy worked. And so it got like super reinforced. Like I won almost all my races as my first year in track. So like that idea of like, if you push yourself as hard as you possibly can, good things are going to come, was like pretty prevalent in my like development as a runner. And if you can get like a 10-year-old to push themselves as hard as they can from 900 meters out in a 1600, like that takes like quite a bit of, that's like big for their growth down the line. Like even now you see a lot of people in races, like elite runners as well, who like will finish really hard, but will lag kind of in that third quarter of a race. And it's like, if you can get someone to push really hard when they're still a long ways away from the finish line, that's pretty cool and pretty special. And that was something that like was kind of drilled into me early in my running career, and it was the same with like the 800. The 800 was run the first 500 as hard as you possibly can, and then trust your legs are going to be there in the last 300. The way you ran a 400 was sprint for as long as you possibly could and trust your legs were going to be there. So when that's kind of how you're like taught to race, I think like the emotional readiness is kind of has to be there for that to work.
Wow. And what great memories that you have from running with your father and kind of instilling that toughness in you. So Ben, to segue to you, as Scott is developing on the team like this, he's showing this toughness, he's showing this willingness to hurt and go to the edge. How is that impacting the rest of the team at Hoka NAZ Elite?
Yeah, I think it was a lead by example sort of situation. The people who are getting the results are the people who you're going to emulate, and Scott was getting the results. And so in a lot of ways, the team was starting to kind of revolve around a small group of individuals that were producing really, really consistent results. And it wasn't just Scott, to be fair. It was Scott, and it was Scott Smith, and it was Steph Bruce and Kellen Taylor, and then shortly thereafter, Alfine Tuliamuk as well. I think they became kind of the core of the team, and that's not to say we didn't have awesome people during that time as well that kind of came in and out for shorter periods of time. But I think, they say the cream rises to the top, and those were kind of our folks. And then we added some people that were like them years later as well. But yeah, I think his willingness to go to those deep, dark places was rubbing off on others. And I also think we were just becoming more professional, like he said, at the top. I mean, it's not that he had to do 90 minutes of rehab necessarily right there in 2015, but it wasn't long before he realized, that he did have to do a lot of extra work to be ready to go, because he wasn't, as biomechanically efficient as some others. And so that kind of work rubbed off on people. I just think it was, the snowball was rolling in the right direction for him and for a lot of people on the team.
And as that was taking place, what was the overall dynamic on the team in terms of how things were developing, the support mechanisms that you had within the group? How was that evolving over time?
I mean, I think we were like, go
Well,
ahead.
you go, Faust.
I think we we're very professional, but I don't think we were had necessarily the budget and the infrastructure to kind of you look at a professional cycling team that has this $1 million+ budget, and they're traveling around on buses, and they've got 4 massage therapists or whatever. I think we were kind of emulating that, and we were doing our best that we could, but we just didn't have the budget to make that happen. But I think everyone wanted to do their job as well as possible, and so I think it was a professional attitude, and doing the best we could with what we had.
And I think too, we also used the fact that we didn't have all those things to motivate us, and we did have that chip on our shoulder kind of feeling, and that, we're going to prove ourselves and we're going to show the world kind of feeling. And that's a good thing to have, I think, and a harder thing to keep as you continue to have success. But I think for a long time, we were able to keep that, that mindset and that sort of drive to I don't know who you're necessarily proving it to, but to prove ourselves. And I do think we did a good job of that for a long time.
So, Ben, Scott took this on himself in an answer previously, so I'm going to put this to you as well. He said no regrets in terms of his career. He feels like he got the most out of his potential. From a coach's perspective, what say you about, did Scott end up maximizing everything that he could over the course of his career?
Oh yeah, no question. No question. I mean, I think that, there's such a brutal reality about sport in general. And everybody has a ceiling, and I think that's tough for a lot of people to hear. A lot of people want to dream about what's possible. But, I do think that he reached his ceiling. I mean, I just really believe that physically. Not to say, to his point earlier, that a place couldn't have been higher, or a time couldn't have been a few ticks faster, of course. But those are the those are the end results in terms of the fitness level he achieved and his performances at those big races on those big stages. I just think there were several cases where he just really ran as fast as he possibly could have on the day, on the biggest stage. And, to me, that's what I was always most proud of, and what I always enjoyed the most, because it was never a question that he would pour that kind of effort into the race. And so there was such an excitement about him on the big stage, because you knew that something special would happen, because you knew he was going to go to that place. And with others, sometimes you were wondering if they were going to have the day, but you knew he was going to have the day. It was just what was the day going to be? And so some of those big ones that, maybe we can chat about were just super, super fun.
From everything that's been covered, Scott, clearly the time that you spent on the team was special. You had a lot of great experiences, high places in major races. What ultimately went into your decision to leave the team?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think, so I think it was probably two things. One, I had a stretch of maybe 18 months where I probably wasn't at my best. I think I'd probably taken a little bit of a step back. And I think probably contributing to that was I felt like I had gotten to a place where I was trying to win Boston in practice. And I think one of the maybe like downsides of like Ben and I being so close is like we really want to do well for each other. And so I was like putting a ton of pressure on myself at workouts, at like training, at like kind of like the joy and the freeness of running maybe wasn't as close to, or it wasn't there the way it had been earlier. And um because like when I got seventh at Boston, right, in 2019, I think Ben and I probably even had a conversation that was like, well, like the next goal is obviously to win one of these, right? Like, you know, I led at 22 miles. So, uh, and I think that maybe we let those expectations drive the ship instead of letting our training educate our expectations. And I think I really wanted to win. I wanted to win for myself, and I wanted to win for the team, and I wanted to win for Ben. But I also think like Ben wanted me to win for me and wanted me to win for the team and wanted me to win for himself as well, which is totally understandable. And I think we were just like banging our head against the wall kind of like over and over again. And what I probably needed was to do less and maybe like switch up some stuff. And that wasn't something I felt like was probably going to happen in the NAZ structure. I kind of felt like I needed a little more freedom. And yeah, but I think like one thing I've thought about a lot since then is like I definitely wouldn't have been like Ben was the right coach for me from 23 to 30 because like he taught me how to be a professional runner. Like he taught me about investing in yourself and like treating this like a real job and not like an extension of college. And he taught me about just being as professional as possible. And he also pushed me really hard and showed me that like I was capable of doing like really big things and like not being afraid of a stage. And then I think in a lot of ways, like Joe Bossard, who I was working with for the last 3 years of my career, was like the right coach for me for those 3 years because he was like, we just got to get back to the basics. Like we can do less. And that's probably what I needed in my 30s was like, I probably didn't need to be slamming my head against the wall, like going to the well every single week. I could probably rely on the like consistency of training and the faith that I'd built up in myself to like have it on race day instead of feeling like I had to consistently prove it. And I think, you know, similarly, like one of the blessings and curses of being on a team with really, really good runners is like they push you and they, you know, they help you get through workouts when you feel bad. But there's also like, it was like impossible if we had four guys in a workout that one of the guys wasn't feeling awesome. And when you feel awesome, you want to take advantage of it. And like, I'm competitive. So if Rory was feeling awesome and he wanted to push a steady state, I'm not going to just like let him beat me in practice. But now we're getting away from the point of the workout, which is like the point of the workout isn't to win the workout, it's to improve fitness for the race. And I think that some workouts kind of got away from us, and we were probably a little bit overcooked a couple times.
Ben, let's get you in here on your perspective about what Scott just covered. Obviously, it's difficult to lose a star of his magnitude on the team. How was the dynamic at that time in terms of what you had to deal with on the team and trying to tamp down that atmosphere of trying to win the workout?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of nuance that was, you know, happening at the time in the sport, and I'd certainly agree with a lot of what Scott's saying. I know that I have forgiven myself after many years of blaming myself because I think that there were some things going on that you know, we were trying to figure out how to beat people that we were better than, and there were reasons I think that were out of our control that were causing those things to happen. And I was trying to sort of make up for that. And, you know, it was really difficult. It was a very, very difficult time for me, you know, to be very honest. And, you know, Scott leaving was hard, super hard, you know, super hard. And it kind of just soured me on a lot of it. It's not your fault, Scott, but you know, when I was talking to Scott on the phone, I don't know when it was, about him retiring. One of the things he said was, "Man, I just can't like go there anymore." And for me, that's exactly what it was like from a coaching perspective. Now, I mean, I realize in retrospect that, even though you like to say all the right things, oh, I stay pragmatic and blah, 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 blah. I just cared, a lot. And I didn't feel like I could go to that place again to care that much about each individual. I cared so much about him and about Steph and about Kellen and Alfine and all the group, everybody we've said. And I just like the thought of recruiting a whole nother group of people and investing that time and energy and building those relationships. I just felt like I couldn't do it, and Scott knows this, but we were looking for a new coach during the time he was leaving, which couldn't have been fun, and, whatever. And it's all worked out now, and the team's good. And it took a while for all that to shake out. And that's sports, that's the business of sports. And sometimes you're on the wrong end of the timing of all that, and of course there were changes that I was alluding to going on in the sport at that time. And we were kind of on the wrong end of that for a little while. And, it just wasn't very fun. But for me, and this is about Scott, but for me, I would just say that that period of time, like Scott mentioned at the top of the show, he got to that period where it was like, okay, this is not fun and I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, that was that time period for me, from a coaching perspective. Not to say I couldn't go back. That's the beauty of coaching. It's different than retiring as a runner. I could go back. And actually, I feel like I have a really good perspective on things now. And, I have a really good grasp on the physiology now and some of the changes and some of the new training methods and whatnot. But at the time, it was just tough. I don't know how else to say it. It was just a really hard time. And not a fun time, but I think things aren't always rainbows and butterflies in life, and I think that's okay. The sooner you kind of realize that and figure out ways to deal with it, the better off you're going to be.
Well, and that's how you move forward for sure. Appreciate both of you guys being so open about talking about that difficult period. And what resonates with me from what both of you said was, yeah, all sports are hard, but there's just something about running and the toll that it takes physically and mentally on the body. And now hearing, Ben, your perspective as a coach and the toll that it took on you, it's difficult. No question about that. Ben, to stick with you for a minute on this one, what's it like then seeing an athlete that you coached for so long reach this point where he's saying, that's it for me as a pro? How does that feel from being his coach for all those years?
Well, I'm very happy for him. There's so much more to life than running. It's such a difficult thing because in the moment, you have to believe that it's the most important thing. You have to, and you have to treat it that way. And he said it so well at the top. Like, you have to believe every day is really important, and you have to believe that you're a big deal, and you kind of almost have to have a little ego about the whole thing. But somehow you have to be able to step back also and realize that those things actually aren't true. It's such a difficult dynamic to get right. It's really, really hard. And he and I worked at it over the years, and I think did a fairly good job. But it is so hard. And then when you leave, oftentimes it's just this huge void because every day has felt so important. You felt so important. What you're doing felt so important. And then you take it away. And I think the thought of that going away is honestly what keeps people at it too long, really, really often. They just can't imagine what life's going to be like without it. I think that's one thing, but that's sort of that's like deep down in the recesses of their brain. I think the thing that oftentimes keeps them going is they're just so self-confident. They believe that they can figure out a way. They believe they can do it again, and that happens in all sports, all levels, men, women, and Scott relied on his self-confidence so much for so many of his performances. And so in many ways, his body kind of helped him make this decision. I don't know what Fauble thinks, but I just think that those are the two biggest reasons people keep going is they just believe in themselves so much. And then somewhere, subconsciously, they just don't know what else they're going to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, I think like two things that came to mind a lot like in the general like process of retiring and my career in general. It's like before I left NAZ Elite, like I didn't take that decision lightly, and so I was asking around to people who I thought were like really smart. And Marielle Hall had a really good point where she was like, the most important thing in the sport is conviction. So if you're not like 100% conviction, if you're not, even if there's 1% of doubt, that's like enough to make up for so much talent and so much training. Like conviction is by far the most important thing in the sport of running, in any sport. And so like when my conviction dipped, that's a pretty good sign I should probably get out. And then also like a blessing in disguise of like the throat thing and the gagging is like one thing a lot of people say but don't actually believe or don't actually like live up to is that they're not defined by running. Like a lot of people say that because it's a popular thing to say. But you don't actually know until it goes away. And it like went away in a pretty big way for me, even when I was still a professional runner. Like there were a lot of days I couldn't even run because I just like, as I was getting dressed or as I was getting on my shoes or as I was packing my bag, I would just have like a gagging attack. And once I had like one, I would have like, it would only get worse from there. So that like took it away. And I was like, I'm bored, but I'm not like depressed. I'm not like wandering around from bar to bar in North Portland. Like I was just like, I'm me who doesn't run. And so I think in that way, it made the transition really easy where it was like, I knew I was going to be okay because like all the skills I had for being a professional runner, all the things that I like that made me a good professional runner, like that conviction, that self-confidence, like that can be channeled. Like you can find a place to put self-confidence. But I just knew I couldn't be a professional runner anymore because the worst thing in the world is like using that confidence and using that like belief and using that conviction and talking yourself into belief and talking yourself into conviction. And then you get to the race and you don't have the cards, like that's the worst thing in the world, to like believe with every fiber of your being that this is going to go really well. And then for it, like not to go, like it not going well, but you racing really hard is one thing. For it not to go well because you're just not the person that you think you should be, that's totally different. And that's worse. So once I felt like I was about to get into that trap again, and I knew that I was okay stepping away, it was like not a hard decision for me to retire.
Some really good lessons to take away for others who may be thinking about a similar transition. Ben, did you want to jump in with something else on that thought?
I wanted to say, let's move on to some lighter topics, Steve.
Well, it just so happens that we're going to bring this around to a little something that both of you are familiar with, and that is the Marathon Project. So to talk about one more race in your career, Scott, you were part of a historic day back in 2020, December of that year, Chandler, Arizona, one of 7 Americans to go sub 2:10 that day. What do you remember most about that special day in Arizona?
I remember it being like a weird situation because we were still in the middle of COVID, and it just wasn't like a race any of us were used to. I remember it being like one of the few times that we did like a true time trial race. I remember it being like very packed up and very crowded in like a good way, where like the momentum of the group was like pushing it forward. And I remember Colin Benny beating me in the last couple miles.
Why'd you let that happen,
It's a good
Scott?
question. It's a good question. It still haunts me.
Well, you're not going to be on the starting line this December, but you are going to be there. You are part of the broadcast team, joining Molly Seidel and me, taking a great look at the race and what's going to happen and what's going to unfold in Chandler for the live stream on FloTrack. Is this something that you would like to make part of your life moving forward, is doing some commentating about the sport?
I mean, we'll see. I think if this goes really well, I would be open to other options. And if it goes really badly, I'll be one and done. You'll see me later. But no, I mean, I think like the beauty of what you guys do is like you guys make it really easy, and it looks like this should be like you're just talking with some buddies about a race. But I imagine it's much harder than that, and I'll get super nervous. So No, I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. I can't wait to get out of Portland in late December and grab some sun in Phoenix and talk running.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. And Ben, I know you had your eye on Scott as part of the commentary team pretty early on. Why did you have him penciled in for a color commentary role?
Well, I think we need some new voices, in the sport for sure. And that's no knock on the people that you see on a lot of the broadcasts. But I think that Scott knows this, but he and I are both big sports fans. And so we kind of look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. And, there's any number of football and soccer games every weekend, every week, baseball, et cetera. And so there's all sorts of voices, right? But in our sport, you typically hear the same ones over and over again. And I think so. Just the fact that he wasn't a voice that we hear all the time, that was one. I also think we tend to skew toward a little too much. How do you say this? Like positivity, in our commentating, and a little less blunt reality. And I felt like both Scott and Molly are people who are a little more blunt and a little more real in their assessment of things, not only honestly, even of their own performances,
Sure.
and I think you heard that in how he discussed his own career. And I think I wanted the broadcast to be really a sports broadcast. It's not look, New York City broadcast, Chicago, et cetera, they kind of have to be more than that because there's more to it than that. But this is just a pro race and that's it. So they can really just commentate on the race. And if somebody cracks, they crack, and I think Fauble will say like, so-and-so cracked, he's out. And not like so often, well, he could come back. No, he's not coming back.
Done.
He's cracked. Right. He's done, and I just felt like he was going to give it to the viewers like he saw it. And he's funny, and I think he'll bring some wit to it as well. And I think we need that also. So there you go. That's why I think he'd be good, and that's why I think he will be good.
Well, I'm looking forward to collaborating with you, Scott. Can't wait to get this underway and bring folks the race from Chandler. Ben, while I have you, you haven't been in the co-host seat for quite a while because you've been certainly busy with race preparations. Anything that you'd like to share with the audience as we're getting close, counting down to race weekend, December 20th and 21st?
I mean, I just think the momentum is building really well and the fields are good. And, I think that, what would I say? I think you should tune in. I think you're going to see a really fun race. I think that we're getting very close to what, you call in the business world proof of concept. Obviously we need the race weekend to go well, but with the number of people we've had sign up and the excitement and the way we've approached it with the podcast and with the Workout Wednesdays that FloTrack's doing and with the website and just the communication, I think, and then the feedback we're getting, I think we're close to proving that there was a place in the landscape for this type of race. And that was our point the whole time, not that we needed to change the landscape, but that there was a place for this type of race. And with prize money and we just felt like America didn't have enough really high quality marathons. And so we're hoping that we can prove that once and for all on December 20th and 21st, and then go from there and create a legacy event.
Can't wait. Thanks to both of you for joining us on this latest episode. It is one race, one project, one pursuit. You know it by now. It's the Marathon Project. And we'll talk to you again next week on another episode of Inside TMP.